For Pacifica Radio, I'm Christina Onnested. Israel says it's now in the third phase of a ground operation in Gaza, having surrounded the southern city of Khan Yunis in a siege similar to its ground assault on the north. Gaza's health ministry says Israeli strikes have killed 16,200 Palestinians. Some 70% are women and children. 42,000 were injured. United Nations Human Rights Chief called Israel's war on Hamas collective punishment on Palestinians and on the international community to insist on a ceasefire. Here's Volker Turk.
Civilians in Gaza continue to be relentlessly bombarded by Israel and collectively punished, suffering death, siege, destruction and deprivation of the most essential human needs, such as food, water, life-saving medical supplies, and other essentials on a massive scale. Palestinians in Gaza are living in utter, deepening horror. The catastrophic situation we see unfolding in the Gaza Strip was entirely foreseeable and preventable. In these circumstances, there is a heightened risk of atrocity crimes.
Israel's widening air and ground offensive in southern Gaza has displaced tens of thousands more Palestinians and is worsening the territory's dire humanitarian conditions, he warned. In Israel, Tuesday, released hostages and family of hostages still in Hamas captivity met with Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and the government's war cabinet. Some relatives shouted at cabinet members and accused them of using hostages for political gain. One hostage said she was terrified Israeli airstrikes in Gaza near her would kill her. Another blasted an Israeli plan to flood Hamas's remaining tunnel system with seawater, saying it's where hostages like her husband are still being held. Nearly half the room left in disappointment before the meeting ended. Many said Israel does not appear to have a plan to free the remaining 138 hostages still captive. Hamas has said a ceasefire must ensue to negotiate further hostage releases. In a rare punitive move, the State Department Tuesday said it's sanctioning extremist Jewish settlers who've attacked Palestinians in the occupied West Bank, barring them from traveling to the U.S. Here's State Department Matthew Miller.
Violence in the West Bank this year is at levels not seen since the Second Intifada. And in recent weeks, an alarming surge in violent acts has driven this unwelcome record even higher. This includes unprecedented levels of violence by Israeli extremist settlers targeting Palestinians and their property, displacing entire communities, as well as violence by Palestinian extremist militants against Israeli civilians. As Secretary Blinken made clear to leaders of the government of Israel last week during his visit to the region, they need to do more to stop extremist violence against Palestinians and hold those responsible for it accountable.
Miller said the bans would cover dozens of settlers and their families, with more to come. The UN has recorded 314 attacks by settlers that have resulted in Palestinian casualties, damage to Palestinian-owned property, or both. Democrats in the Senate introduced a $111 billion bill to fund Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan Tuesday, akin to President Joe Biden's $108 billion request. It faces a stalemate in Congress over Republican demands. Funding for Ukraine include tougher U.S. border control and hardline immigration policies, Edwin Vieira reports.
Immigrant rights groups oppose the House plan because it would in many cases ban asylum and create barriers for migrants seeking it. Constanza Segovia, with Hartford Deportation Defense, is calling on Democratic senators to stand against it, arguing the right to asylum shouldn't be negotiable.
Stand strong and not bargain these key policies.
Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer is against it being part of the funding package.
Many Republican members say they want to do Ukraine. If they themselves can't put a border amendment that would pass, then what the heck are we doing?
Schumer says more does need to be done to protect the border, but says Republicans should put forward a standalone bill, which could gain bipartisan support. But Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell says they'll filibuster the entire package if it's not included.
I'm advocating, and I hope all of our members vote no on the motion to proceed to the shell, to make the point, hopefully for the final time, that we insist on meaningful changes to the border.
I'm Edwin J. Vieira for Pacifica Network and Public News Service.
As world leaders are converging for a summit on climate negotiations in Dubai, the World Meteorological Organization released a report on the global climate over the last decade, finding the rate of climate change surged in that time. The report says a thinning and loss of glaciers worldwide is particularly ominous. Former President Donald Trump is declining to rule out becoming a dictator if he again wins the presidency. He spoke to Fox News Channel host Sean Hannity and said he would use dictatorial powers only on day one of becoming president to close the border and drill. Trump has previously talked about targeting his rivals and has referred to them as vermin. President Joe Biden has stepped up his warnings about Trump, contending he's determined to destroy American democracy. Biden told campaign donors last night he isn't sure he'd be running for re-election if Donald Trump wasn't also in the race. I'm Christina Onnested, reporting for Pacifica Radio.